All right, so we're back. This is wildfires on the left. These are the ones that are active. Um, the stuff that's smudgy, that's just bad air quality. On the right is fires that have happened this calendar year from January to March 20. What day is it today? March 22nd? Yeah. In the right? And so this is the kind of thing that um, is life-changing for anybody that happens to be in this path. In Paradise, there were people that had 10 or 15 minutes to leave. There are two separate stories, as the book talks about, of old couples that hid in a pool in order to try to avoid succumbing to their fire that hit them. At speeds of some of these fires, it is a football field every 3 seconds. These are bad and they destroy quickly. Every single one of these is somebody's home. Every single one of these is somebody's life. And you think that this can all be gone in an afternoon. And we're getting to more and more of these all the time. So that's the United States, that's California. Here in Nevada, we have some wildfires, as you see. But it can be bad. The Amazon this past year had some of the worst fires in recorded history. There were fires in all of these spots. So here superimposed is the United States outline, so you can have an idea of the size, of the scale of this. And in and around the Amazon, there were fires. These environmental groups accused the Brazilian government of making these controlled burns. They didn't have to be controlled burns, but it does appear that there was some evidence that Brazil was purposefully burning down acres and acres of the Amazon in order to plant soy to sell to China, who was trying to find a new source of soy ever since our president put an import tax on Chinese purchasing of soy. So a lot of American farmers had a lot of soy that they could not distribute, and Brazil capitalized on this by burning down huge chunks of the Amazon, at least according to a lot of environmental groups. Brazil denies it, of course, to grow soy to feed to China. And it's pretty bad. Some people call the Amazon the lungs of Earth. Huge amounts of biodiversity, huge amounts of biodiversity. The estimates vary wildly, but huge amounts, like north of 50% of biodiversity on the planet. Things that we haven't seen. Entire peoples live here that have never been contacted by humans. And this all goes up. On the left, you can see the aftermath. So that's the United States. That's the Amazon. These are wildfires that are becoming more and more common. And then there was Australia, which was bigger. It was an entire continent on fire. I don't know if that's an exaggeration. I mean, if you were to tell me that my bedroom, my bathroom, and the living room were on fire, I would say my house was on fire. 95% of Australian population lives on what's called the Boomerang Coast here on the right. They went through this for a good chunk of this past year, and only now have these fires finally been put out. but experts estimate up to 1 billion animals died during this process. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I mean, Australia has suffered the worst from the hole in the ozone layer, which happens to be directly over Antarctica and affects Australia. So they have lots of skin cancer there. They also, the entire central part of Australia is quite desertified. So they finally had to add 2 extra colors to their temperature maps to show how much hotter it is in Australia now. It is just much, much, much hotter. And again, you can just see this devastation before and after these fires. Okay. So we're talking about health. And wildfires are really, really, really bad for your health if you happen to die in one, which I don't recommend. But really, there's lots of other things that matter when the climate starts changing around you. The WHO, who you might have heard a lot from recently with the coronavirus outbreak, is that climate change is going to undermine certain environmental aspects of health. Water quality and quantity, food security, we talked about that last time, and we'll talk about it a little more right now. Infectious diseases, we'll talk about that in a future lecture, and protection from disasters. The most obvious thing with global warming is that the Earth gets hotter. You get more hot days more often, more record hot days, and these will have an effect on human bodies. You get heat cramp, rashes, edema, syncope, exhaustion, heat stroke, particularly is going to affect the young and the elderly. And these will have other effects that we'll talk about in a little more detail. And as you can see on this right here, so we have here, you imagine a distribution of temperatures. What happens with climate change is we change the variance and we change the mean. That is, it gets hotter and we have a broader range of temperatures. So we get cold days less often, but maybe some pretty big extremes. But we get many, many, many more hot record hots. It's particularly bad if you are homeless to be in a very, very hot environment. If you live in a city, concrete absorbs heat, steel absorbs lots of energy, and so it gets a lot hotter than rural areas. If you live in the top floor, you have pre-existing conditions, and drinking alcohol, where you stop being aware of the temperature around you. People die every year from heat stroke. People die every year from this. In Arizona, many, many people die every year and have died since I was a kid, more now. I'm sure it happens in Nevada as well. This is an interesting connection, which when you think about it makes sense, but it's probably the kind of connection between global warming and consequences that might not be obvious. Is that when it gets hot, there are more crimes. There's more conflict. There's more property crimes. And you can see in the statistics, right? So the red here, the red graphs are just in Eastern Africa. And you can see as the temperature increases, there's more and more intergroup violence, civil wars, political leaders exiting, right? There seems to be a pretty direct relationship. Even across the entire equator, you get more riots and intergroup violence, civil conflicts of various sorts. various intergroup conflicts. And the correlations aren't perfect. There's not lots of data about, especially the extremes of this range, but it's a pretty direct ratio where you can see that as it gets hotter, there is more violence. And there's particular fears here, not just as violence increases, but as the climate becomes unstable and you get, so this is Peter Gleick's typology of historical water conflicts, but I think it applies to resources in general. There's lots of conflicts that happen over controlling resources as political and military tools or targets in order to the people that have these resources thrive and the people that don't. And so you want to be the group that is in charge. The Department of Defense has come out in favor in saying that this is a national security issue. Climate impacts are observable, measurable, and real and have near and long-term consequences. The idea is that climate change is a threat multiplier. So if we don't anticipate these changes, there will be more and more instability. There's going to be supply-induced scarcity, which we talked about. As temperatures go up, there's less food and water. We're also growing our population. We're going to hit 9 billion population at some point this century. So there's going to be demand-induced scarcity. And there's also structure-induced scarcity, right? The haves and the have-nots. So as there's more scarcity, there's decreased environmental productivity and increased migration and expulsion. States get weakened and there's conflicts that might lead to coup d'etat or worse, right? Overthrowing governments or worse. Threat multiplier, right? If you have a stable climate and a stable energy grid and an unstable political system, it will throw the other ones into instability. It's the same with energy. Lack of energy will lead to political instability and might lead to some climate instability. But the link is really strong between climate security and both energy and political stability. If the world is changing too quickly for humans to adapt, there will be some populations that will become desperate. And I hope we don't have to live through those, but I worry that we will live through some of those times and places and situations. And this is important that when I'm telling you this isn't just academics, this isn't just scientists, this isn't environmental groups or lobbyists. These are governmental organizations and non-governmental organizations. Every military on the planet, including the United States, every intelligence agency on the planet, including all of our intelligence agencies, apparently we have more than a dozen, and every government, with the exception of the United States government, and I guess the Brazilian government is also now questioning climate change. But basically every major group, these are very serious people, military intelligence, all of these serious people are saying that climate change is a risk to global peace. It creates risks for war. Maybe I will pause here and finish up this section after this. Thank you.